As Sean Combs stands trial for racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking charges, he's behind bars at a notorious federal jail, the MDC. I take a look at what Combs' days are like during the trial and his lawyer's complaints about meeting with him. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Sean Combs is locked up at a jail with a history of complaints and problems. Combs fought tooth and nail to stay out of jail during his trial, but he lost each and every request he made to get bail. He was willing to put up millions and millions of dollars and hire private security, but the judge said no dice after hearing arguments from prosecutors who claimed that Combs was trying to tamper with witnesses from his jail cell. Combs has been housed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn since his arrest in September of 2024. It's not a great place, according to anyone who's been housed there. This is the jail where Jeffrey Epstein hanged himself while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges back in 2019. And before you say that didn't happen, Dan Bongino, the current deputy director of the FBI, says indeed it happened, and he has video evidence that he's going to be releasing that he says backs up that claim. But still, that was a failure of the MDC staff to keep an eye on Epstein. But back to Sean Combs. Combs is on trial in the Southern District of New York on federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all of those charges, and his lawyers have said that Combs has never sex trafficked or sexually assaulted anyone. Now, it's bad enough being in jail or prison, but imagine you're a billionaire and you've been living large for more than 20 years, people doing everything you want, and then you wind up in the MDC. Now, I'm sure it's been a total shock to Sean Combs' system. Even from the outside, the MDC looks pretty drab and dreary. It is a jail after all. And I can only imagine what it's like on the inside. And I've been in a handful of prisons and jails. Combs is on trial in Lower Manhattan at the federal courthouse on Pearl Street. And I'm not sure if he's getting a special lunch at the courthouse, but he's getting his regular breakfast and dinner at the MDC. And that can be stuff like oatmeal and grits or a continental breakfast. And for dinner, it could be a chicken salad, a hot dog, Salisbury steak, or turkey roast. That's all according to the BOP menu. And throughout the trial, his lawyers have complained about the access they have to him. They try to get him on the phone, and despite him having 300 minutes on his phone account, according to records, they say they can't get in touch with him. Judge Subramanian has said the Marshal Service, which transports Combs to and from court and provides security at the courthouse, is already stretched thin, and they've provided a lot of accommodations to Combs and his team. So the judge says they can try to get Combs to the courthouse by 7 a.m. each morning to meet with his lawyers. The marshals just can't hang out with Combs all night and into the evening hours so his lawyers can meet with him. There are rules. And he has to be back at the jail by a certain time for a head count. This is another Law&Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera, birth control shots, and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible to take part in a lawsuit. Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients were not properly warned about this risk. It's free to check. It takes just a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on your screen, click the link below, or go to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify.
All right. So to talk about what Sean Combs' life is like behind bars during his trial, I want to bring somebody in who would know all about that. He is Dwayne Hendricks. He is a former deputy warden of the MDC, where Sean Combs is being held and where he has been held now for many months. So, Dwayne, thanks for coming on. First off, have you been following the trial, as it progresses?
Yes, I have. I've been following the trial, even the pre-trial, what was going on before the trial started. I've done some coverage in terms of the conditions of Mr. Combs while he was there, more specifically when he first arrived and he was on suicide watch. So from that point on, I've been very interested in following up on the trial and the process that he's going through right now.
Yeah, it's funny, he was on suicide watch. That's pretty typical for a high profile inmate and for a lot of inmates, when they get brought in at first. I mean, let's clear that up first off the bat. Explain to me why that is done. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh my God, we think this person is going to kill themselves. Isn't it precautionary? And so you can assess somebody, because this would be a major shock to the system of somebody like a Sean Combs, who's been living in the lap of luxury for many years, for decades, to then be thrown into the MDC, which has a very notorious reputation.
Yes, and not all inmates are placed on suicide watch when they first arrive. It just depends on they're asked various questions from different professionals. Once they arrive, they go through a health screening, they go through a mental health screening, they go through a security screening. And like you said, this is a high profile individual. So he was going to be placed in what we call administrative detention initially in a special housing unit, just to assess him before they would place him in a general population unit. And I'm sure he was probably placed on suicide watch based on some answers that he gave to some questions upon his arrival at the facility. And according to reports, there were drugs found in his room, hotel room, when he was arrested. So, I mean, he could have been, high off some drugs or something like that, and just a precautionary measure just to make sure there was no self-harm involved once he arrived. Because I believe after about 2 weeks after he was there, he was actually placed in a modified, what we call like a modified general population unit, not in the West Building, where what we would say the killers and dealers are more or less at. He's in the East Building, where it's more dorm style and very low number of inmates.
How bad is the MDC? Obviously, we always hear these stories that it's just so bad. It's a terrible place. I mean, you were the deputy warden there. I mean, how bad is it? I mean, prisons are not, and this is a jail. It's a federal jail, a lockup. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been to a prison, and I've been to a couple. I've been to jails, and I don't think I've ever been to one where I was like, oh yeah, this isn't bad. This isn't so bad. Like I've never been to one where I was like, yeah, I might want to hang out here. So what makes MDC so bad?
Well, I wouldn't say the place is bad, but I will admit that it does have a sort of troubled history. I mean, going all the way back to when it was activated in the early 90s. I mean, I can talk for 30 to 45 minutes on the different scandals that have occurred there throughout the years. And more recently, they had the riot in the front lobby where some citizens, they were, pepper spray or something like that sprayed on the visitors that they were trying to get into the lobby. But I think it's mainly because just every 5 to 10 years, there's something that happens there. When I first arrived, it was coming off the heels of one of the officers getting pregnant by a convicted felon who had allegedly murdered 2 undercover cops over in Staten Island. And he was brought back to MDC Brooklyn to be retried because he was sentenced to death. And during that time, an officer got pregnant by him. So that was obviously a big scandal. And we were under a lot of scrutiny from the Department of Justice and the Office of Inspector General during that time. I mean, we had a couple of inmate suicides. We had a staff suicide while I worked there. But I will say, in spite of all the different scandals and different things that have happened there are probably, out of the 500 to 600 staff there, I would say 85 to 90% of those folks there are there to do their job, take care of business. And then a small number of staff who find themselves with a lot of cases, whether it's administrative or even some criminal, for bringing in contraband and doing different things with those inmates there. So that's what makes it, in the public eye, a bad place. But I would say, 85 to 90% of the people there are there to do their job and take care of business.
Mm-hmm. So during the trial, Sean Combs, the marshals are taking care of the security, obviously, at the courthouse. Each day he's carted off to the courthouse for the proceedings from the MDC. His lawyers have complained that they're not getting enough time with him. Allegedly he's got $300 or 300 minutes on his phone privileges, but they somehow can't get through to him. They want more time with him. Judge Subramanian has said that, the U.S. Marshal Service, they've already made, they're making a lot of accommodations for Sean Combs and for this trial and for him to be able to spend time with his attorneys. And so it sounds like there's some tension there and the judge is trying to accommodate them, but it sounds like they can't just have like the U.S. Marshals being his personal bodyguards 24 hours a day so he can hang out somewhere with his attorneys to confer on the case. So what do you think of that? What do you think of this? I mean, they're saying he's got these 300 minutes allegedly, but it's not working and we can't talk to him. What do you make of these complaints?
Well, he is like you said, he's a U.S. Marshals inmate, although he's being housed in MDC Brooklyn. Since he has his case through the Southern District of New York, if the Manhattan Correctional Center was still open, he would have been housed over there, which is very close to the courthouse. So with court ending about 3:30, 4 o'clock every day, they could out process him, take him over to the MCC, and then he could sit with his attorneys for another couple of hours to strategize. But, as you may know, I mean, traveling from Manhattan to Brooklyn, after 4 o'clock every day, it might take a while, so he's probably not getting back to the MDC till about 5 or 5:30 because he's got to process to the East Building, get in the unit, eat, and then so we're talking about 5:30. Then, visiting ends Monday through Friday at MDC Brooklyn at 7 p.m. and at 4 p.m. on Saturdays. So you're talking about an hour
even for lawyers? Even for lawyers?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
For lawyers. However, I will say this, the marshals and the executive staff and the staff in the receiving discharge area, they work closely with the Marshal Service. So it would just be a conversation. Hey, this guy probably need another 2 hours every evening, maybe even on the weekends, depending on how many inmates are also needing to visit with their attorneys on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. So they would just need to work out what we call a special visit in the visiting room. They can put him on an out count. There's usually a stand-up count every day between the hours of 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. This trial is only going to last another few weeks. So it would be easy for the administration to accommodate that extra hour, especially since he's probably not getting back from the court until well after 5 o'clock. And the last thing that MDC, like you said, it's been a troubled facility for a number of years. And the last thing you want to do is to insert yourself in this trial, meaning if he is convicted, you don't want to have his legal team say, hey, you can file an appeal because you didn't have effective counsel, because you didn't have access to go over strategy. They had to make decisions without my permission. I really didn't want that strategy. So, and the population is down significantly at MDC Brooklyn, even though MCC has brought all their inmates over there. So he's in a unit with about 20 inmates. The East Building probably don't have no more than about 100 inmates in that building right now. So to me, it's an easy thing to accommodate. Now, if this was 10 years ago when I was there, we had over 3,500 inmates, then it probably would have been an issue for us.
So they've also talked about, the judge is saying like, well, maybe there's something we can do where we can get him here to the courthouse at 7 a.m. and you guys can kind of meet with him in confab at that time before court. Maybe that's easier because you're not running into as much traffic. But they're still talking about the Marshal Service being stretched really thin. So if you're getting somebody like Sean Combs ready for court in the morning, are you transporting him? First of all, does he get to eat his breakfast at the MDC? And then you guys, like in his jail jumpsuit, you put him in the van and you transport him over to the courthouse. You get him dressed in his court clothes there. And then that's how it works. Tell me how that process works.
So typically every day, between 2 and 4 p.m., the marshals will let the receiving and discharge staff know which inmates have court the next day. So after the 5 a.m. count clears, the staff will awaken those inmates if they're not already awake, and get them ready to be taken down to the receiving and discharge area to be out processed to the court. So it would really be up to the marshals to get there a little early to take him over. And like I said, since it's not that many inmates over in the East Building, depending on what their resources is like, because the Bureau, we don't transport inmates to court. Again, he's a marshal's inmate, so he would move with them, either in a van or in a bus or whatever, however they're going to transport the number of inmates that needs to go to court. So I think that would be the plan of action, to get him either over there early in the morning or accommodate him later in the evenings, which wouldn't be an issue, as long as staff are willing to take overtime, and management has the right to assign a management official to stay over to accommodate that. Because again, you don't want to over insert yourself in this particular case, especially with the amount of public interest locally here in America and as well as internationally.
Do you think that this is being overblown a little bit by his defense team, all of these complaints? I mean, I'm sure they would love to be able to hang out with him until 10 o'clock at night, and when I say hang out, I mean meet with him, have some dinner, go over strategy, go over testimony. I mean, he is feverishly writing notes to his defense team while he is in court. I mean, he is a very active member of his defense team. He is helping, if not almost orchestrating parts of his defense here at the table, at the defense table there. So is some of this maybe being overblown? Because I'm sure that he lost his fight to stay out on bail. I mean, they looked at him as somebody who might tamper with witnesses and stuff like that. Is maybe some of this being overblown, or do you think that these are legit concerns?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Because like you said, they fought tooth and nail to say, hey, MDC Brooklyn is not the place, anybody should be incarcerated. Let's send them over to a jail over in New Jersey. And then I also saw reports after he was there for a couple of weeks that from his lead attorney that the staff were being very accommodating.
Right.
However,
I remember that. He said, "Oh yeah, they've done a lot for us." Da 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 da. He was being very complimentary.
Yeah, but now that we're in the trial, so I think anything that they can get on record to uphold whatever appeal process they want to go through, if he is convicted, they want to put that on the record. And like I said, in the times we're in now, with him having a low population, to me, it'll just be easier to make that accommodation to allow them to meet with him for a couple of hours, and if that's what they want to do, because again, this trial is going to be over in the next few weeks, and by accommodating it, especially if you can, then it eliminates MDC Brooklyn being inserted into any habeas actions that Mr. Combs may file if he's not acquitted on all charges.
What's it like though when he gets ready in the morning? I mean, does he, you think, get to eat there? Like, does the staff make sure he eats before he takes off for court? Or, I mean, how does that work? I mean, I know this is not like, room service or something like that. That's
right.
Silly. This is a jail.
Yeah, so the food is prepared, 3 days in advance, and typically breakfast is a continental type breakfast. So what food service will do, their workers are up well before the 5 a.m. count. Most of their workers are up about 1 or 2 in the morning. So they're already, preparing. They put some continental, like a milk and some fruit or, something like that together. And he can eat that meal before, if he decides to. He may have got it. I heard he complained about the food at the institution. So he may even snack on some of his commissary food before he is brought down to receiving a discharge. But yeah, they offer or provide meals for inmates that are either going to court or maybe being transported after they've been convicted and designated. Before they get on an airlift, they'll provide those guys meals or ladies meals before they leave the building in the morning. So and I'm sure he's just, again, I don't know Mr. Combs, but just following the trial, I'm sure he's probably up early and ready to go, and probably standing beside his bunk, because I know he's in a dorm style unit there in the East Building, and eager to get to the court and do the things that he's been doing on a daily basis throughout the trial.
Well, it's been interesting to watch somebody of his prominence have to be put into the MDC as he goes through this process. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was listening to some of your other commentary, and I know Mr. Combs didn't take a plea, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why I believe he did not, and that's because he would not be eligible for any First Step Act credits, which is a law that was put in place to help reduce inmate sentences, by upwards of almost 4 months a year. And he would also not be eligible for the residential drug abuse program, which could offer him a year off his sentence. So even if they offered him 15 years, looking at 54 days of good time plus another 120, because he could have earned 10 days a month for doing certain classes, you're talking about almost 6 months a year. So even if they had offered him 15, he could easily have done just half that time on a plea agreement. But if he is sentenced on any of these counts, whatever time he gets, he's only going to get those 54 days off. So I think that's why he went ahead to trial. And I think that is why he's fighting feverishly for his freedom, because even if he's just convicted of the lesser charges of just transportation for something, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact charge.
Transportation to engage in prostitution. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So even with that, I mean, that's 10 years. So he's betting on himself, and I think that's one of the reasons why he went ahead and went to trial.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. That was very interesting that you brought that up. There are also some people who are pretty prominent in the legal field who believe that if, let's say, Sean Combs is convicted, that he might have some really good appellate issues too. So there's that. So you never know. There's all this stuff floating out there, Dwayne. Also, this whole talk about whether or not the president might consider pardoning him if he thinks he was treated unfairly. So there's a lot going on with this case. Thank you so much, Dwayne Hendricks. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back.
Sure. And I'm hoping, whatever the outcome may be, if he is convicted, I'd love to come back and talk to you about the designation process and the pre-sentencing process and what that would look like before he goes for sentencing. So looking forward to spending some more time with you. Thank you for having me.
We will set a date. Yeah, we will set a date. I'll text you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.